And you think that's just by accident? Think back to that previous thing I read by Notestein, how they'd attack the family and the familial roles. It's all been done. There's nothing out there in entertainment that you can sit back and enjoy without being brainwashed in some particular PC area. Nothing. Because everything, as Jacques Ellul said, is propaganda run by an industry, a culture-creating industry. Look at the video games your children are playing. They said they'd needed a warrior species for about 20 years for the coming riots, etc. So they gave us 20 years of video games, and these not youngsters, grew up playing the bad guys, the guys in black who just go around slaughtering people. And here we have them in the streets now with machine guns and bossing people around. Desensitized to slaughter. Here's an article here from Business and Media Institute. UK politician, United Kingdom politician, urges video game manufacturers to include, and what they already have in their games, global warming messages. The former chair of Parliament Climate Change Committee, who no one elected, recommends climate-themed games to educate people about the impact of prolonged changes to our climate. See, everything is propaganda, and they must get to the minds of the young, because that's where your impressions are made. Men are all stupid, etc., etc. In these innocent little stories. And it's by Jeff Poor, this story. In Britain, Lord Putnam, I've talked about Lord Putnam before, a radical environmentalist, but it's really depopulation and eugenics. That's his real vocation. The founding chairman of the National Endowment for Science. So this is no little tiddler speaking here. Technology and the arts. That's interesting. And a former chairman of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on the Draft Climate Change Bill issued a statement ahead of his speech slated for the end of this month at the Terra Future Conference. See, all these foundations that none of us vote for, urging video games to be used to spread the message about climate change. Serious games based upon real-life geography should be vital tools in our fight against climate change, said Lord Putnam in a statement. Educating people about the impact. Now, see, this is propaganda. Don't get confused when they use these words, educating people. They mean using propaganda to indoctrinate people, young people, about the impact of prolonged changes to our climate in an accessible way is the best catalyst for action I know. In other words, sneaking it in where they don't know they're being brainwashed in a game is okay by this guy. British politicians have been actively promoting various ways to curb the effects of so-called anthropogenic global warming. Anthropogenic, man-made. On February the 4th, Lord Turner, our Lord here, the British climate czar, we've all got one, you see, told the UK Environmental Audit Committee that climate laws may be needed to restrict airplane flights and reduce carbon emissions. Well, he also said they want to eventually cancel out all tourism and all travel abroad, which is essential travel only, and it'll be for diplomats, governments, executives of corporations. And so that's the world they're bringing in. All this stuff about terrorism and the borders, etc., is to keep the masses in for the brave new worlds. But in the meantime, we'll almost get our brainwashing. You know, for most people, it's always been over. You understand, they were never here to be saved. Because every day of the week, they tune that into that TV box that was given to them for this very purpose of utter brainwashing. They're addicted to it completely, and you cannot live in two worlds. You cannot live. It's like a heroin addict trying to get off it and inject himself with heroin all the time. You can't do it. Because there's incredible intellect and coordination and propaganda that's put into everything that you watch, and even especially your entertainment. The last place you'll look and think, well, I'm being brainwashed. No, you are being brainwashed. That's why there are so many messages and movies and all your dramas, your soaps. Look at what's in the children's cartoons. Again, people are paid by our governments to put all this stuff in the cartoons to do with global warming, and adults are bad. They destroyed the planet. What do you think about it? Now, another winner here is Maclean's magazine in Canada. It's been wrong in almost everything it's ever written, although really it's a propagandic arm of the CFR. And it goes on about Plan B for global warming. This is the same Maclean's magazine that had the Prime Minister of Canada, the US President, all voting for the Prime Minister of Mexico during the free trade negotiations. I think it was his name, Salinas, as to be the head of the NAFTA. He was the best man for the job. A month after they printed that, the guy and his family ran off with the Treasury of Mexico. Do you remember that? It was a few years back. The guy that they said, this is Maclean's magazine, said, and the Prime Ministers in Mexico, and the President said was a guy for the job. He would be the head, put it ahead of this new NAFTA. He ran off with the whole Treasury of Mexico, and the US and Canada had to bail him out by millions and millions of dollars that we borrowed from the World Trade, the IMF, and the World Bank. Remember that? We forget all these things. But anyway, here they are. Plan B for global warming. Maclean's magazine. There's a drawing of Don Quixote tacked to the wall of David Keith's University of Calgary office, one of Gustave Doré's famous illustrations showing the aging knight flying backwards off his horse as his lance bends against the blade of a windmill. Then they go through all this pablum as they tell you that he's into climate change and all the rest of it, and is a scientist figuring out ways to save the planet. But you scroll down, there's only one interesting thing in the whole propagandic blurb. It says, when Keith first took an interest in such ideas lumped together under a broad rubric, geoengineering, we're just hearing about that now in the public, as a grad student 20 years ago, they could hardly be discussed in polite scientific company, even less so in environmental circles where many viewed any proposal to manage climate change as a threat to efforts to stop it. 20 years ago, right? It says it was a freak show, he recalls, verboten in mainstream forums. The topic, listen to this, the topic was only debated at secret NASA and White House organized confabs. That's the only important thing in the propaganda piece. Because you see, everything is done in secrecy. All the real stuff is done long before in secrecy. The planning of now was planned a long time ago in secrecy. And the whole global warming scenario, and who would even pick to front it, was decided a long time ago in secrecy. And here they are with NASA and these scientists 20 years ago discussing how they'd pull it off today in secrecy. Quite something, eh? And all the stuff they talked about was taken from the Club of Rome, who first came up with the idea of global warming to take control of the planet and get everybody to submit to a new world type authority. And these guys literally want to seed the planet across the world with these gases and sprays across the seas. And guess what? They've already been doing it for 12 years solid. Solid, that is. They were doing it before testing this stuff out, but solidly for the last 12 years. Yeah, done in secret. And you think NASA's all to do with space program? It's the military-industrial complex. There's a great article here, too, about the cashless society, how they're training the children in different countries to use it. Home of the Impact Cashless Catering Payment System. CRB Solutions. Million users use in over 1,500 schools throughout the UK. It teaches the children to use the cashless system to take iris scans and to take thumbprints. I think they started with thumbprints and so on. And it's been pushed by all governments over in Europe now. It seems to be it's amazing how they pick one company, you see. There's always a favorite company that's chosen in advance to push and train the children. These children are already used to walking through sensor machines as they go through schools and armed guards and stuff like that, and using their thumbprints. They're being trained for the kind of world which is normal to them as they grow up. Straight Pavlovian training. And they'll never ask why. Because why? Because it's normal to them. And their parents will never think and say, you know, it shouldn't be like this. It didn't used to. So I'll put these links up, as I say, on my show, at the site at the end of the show. But what I'm trying to tell you is there's nothing out there that is not thought out and great detail, minute detail, by think tanks and the so-called expert scientists and the culture creation industry, all working together in collusion to prepare your mind for every part of the future that's coming.